Hey, welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. It's good to be with you. Today we interview Kevin Goetz, the author of Audience Ology and the creator of Screen Engine. We heard Kevin's stories of what it means to be an additional stakeholder in the filmmaking process as a person who interviews the audience and gives feedback to filmmakers. Absolutely fascinating. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as Kevin shares many great insights and really encourage us as future filmmakers and creators to embrace the process and embrace your audience. So enjoy the show. It's fun to read your book because what you did when you're in your book is just start telling your story. The people that you know, even it might have been early on in the intro or something like that. You even talked about, the neighborhood you grew up in New York is just down the street from Eddie Murphy, where Eddie Murphy grew up. And I think that when we're in Hollywood, we all want to tell the story that same way. So as I was reading your book, I thought, that's how I tell my story. What I do for a living starts with kind of like who I am and why I got into it. Isn't it kind of like part of our life journey? If you're in Hollywood, is your life connection to film and the people that you love or the neighborhood you grow up in?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to write in a very colloquial style and to make it sound like my voice. The best compliment I get from people who know me are comments like, I heard you speaking to me. I knew that, and the other great compliment I get are for people who don't know me, who say, I get that. When you talk about finding your and, your A-N-D, finding your and, that's my story, because many of us set out to do something often completely in a different area and end up in our business and not necessarily in the place in our business that we thought we would be. I thought I was going to be, a movie actor and first probably a Broadway actor and singer and dancer, and then a movie actor and maybe producing, but that was, not the ultimate place I ended up. I did do that for a really strong and long period of time. But so I think that it's really interesting to know that we all come from a place, as you said, that had one intention, but often morphed into something else. And those of us who are lucky enough to stay within the category can really recognize that. Why did you always career at it? Did you always want to be both Tim and Keith? Did you guys want to be in the
what else do you know? What else do you know about the film business growing up besides there are actors and then there's a person called a director, which you don't even know what that is, and a word producer, but that I don't have a context for anything else besides actor and director. So when you show up in Hollywood, you're thinking, of course, you're going to do one of those two jobs. But it does kind of evolve, huh?
Yeah, it started for me. I started in advertising actually at an agency in DC, working for, a small agency that did a lot of contract work for the government. And I had always been a film buff. Like I say this all the time on the podcast. I was the subscriber to Columbia House. I got the 10 VHS, box. And
you're a sucker.
I'm a sucker, exactly. But I was always kind of a film buff. I loved it. I remember seeing all these movies when I was a kid. And it was always in the back of my mind. And then I had an opportunity to move to LA, and I did. And similar to Tim, my knowledge of the industry was basically producer, director, writer, actor. And that was it. I had no sense of everything else that was behind it. And when I started in the industry, I was in film development. I interned for a producer at Sony. And I went from there. And then I went to New Line and was at New Line for almost 3 years working in film development. And then
who'd you work for at both of those companies?
Sony, the producer was Lauren Lloyd.
I love Lauren Lloyd.
Yeah. I worked for her for about almost a year. And then
Lauren's sister, Wally Nacita?
I don't
know.
No,
not sister. Sorry, not sister. Partner. They were partners.
Her partner was.
It's Wally. Rick Nacita's sister. Was Wally Nacita.
Yeah, correct. There you go. And then I went from there to New Line. I worked for George Ward for about 2 years, 2.5 years. And then from there, I went over to Fox and ended up in creative advertising and trailers.
And Tim and you, did you guys have like an art background? Did you have it? You're both in creative advertising, right? Or was it just more of a creative background?
Oh, no, I was a theater major in college.
I know. See?
So and again, like what else? You just know you want to be in the entertainment industry.
Right.
So the college offers theater. That sounds like entertainment. And
Right.
you
Sure.
jump into it. I mean, when I first got to Hollywood, I didn't know what to do at all. So I very literally parked my car in Burbank and I walked door to door. And I would just open it.
Oh, I
And it's a
love
production
that.
company. I opened the door. And at the end of the day, by the end of the day, I had offered 3 jobs. And one of them, I walked into Dick Clark Productions and I got offered a job on the American Music Awards. So within a week, I was from arriving in, in Burbank to being on, on a show. And that's olden days, right? That's
You know what?
1990
I just
before
heard
2001 or whatever.
Tim, I just heard a great story talking about knocking on doors. My husband Neil and I are really very, very close with R.J. Wagner, with Robert Wagner, and Jill St. John. And he told us a story that, I don't know, 40 years ago or whatever, this guy was knocking on door to door, finding in the flats of Beverly Hills, trying to find a place to live. His name was Mark Harmon. And and he said he got no responses except from RJ, who said, hey, look, he was with Natalie Wood at the time. I think he said, look, I don't have space because the kids are using the guest house, but if it ever opens up, whatever. And it forged a lifelong friendship. And he never forgot that. It's so nice to be kind to people. Cut to, maybe 18, 20 years ago, I was running a company or a division of a company at OTX called, what was the motion picture group of a company called OTX. Right. And it was in Hollywood, near Highland and like Orange, I think it was. Okay. It was in an old funeral factory or something. And I'm coming up from the parking and I see a woman walking door to door with flyers. And I said, hi, what are you doing? And she said, I'm looking for a job. And I said, oh, well, what do you do? And whatever it was. I said, come on in. And I brought her in and we gave her a job. It was, she didn't have any real work skills per se.
Experience in film, like it's hard to.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we gave her some office tasks, but the gratitude that she expressed and showed, just sent me over. And it was just, I've always lived my life that way,
I was we were telling a story yesterday because I do another podcast, and a guy I've known for 27 years joined me yesterday. And I knew him because he was at a party with my brother when he was in college. And basically out of the blue, they called me at the party and said, hey, could you give my friend Ben a job? I was like, yeah, just send him out. It just,
Tim, let me tell you something. That is so important. Yeah. And for anyone listening who, sends an email out to someone, let me tell you, I mean, there's a lot of phishing these days, as we know.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I can't even tell you, as running a business, particularly, I don't know, I'm on every friggin' list there is, and I have to distinguish between phishing and real inquiries. But if it's a real inquiry, there's not ever a time where we don't get in touch with the person, because I have assistants, and assistants can at least say, not interested. No, right. No is an answer, but to ignore someone to me is not cool. And I love
LinkedIn that way. I feel like LinkedIn allows for that connection. There is something.
Yeah, but a lot of people.
I like what you're saying, because
Tim,
Hollywood often has.
A lot of people though don't have LinkedIn who are like just starting out.
Yeah, I guess that's
have
true.
LinkedIn these days.
Yeah. They have TikTok, and none of us are on TikTok.
Yes. Exactly. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What were you saying though?
No, I was saying it's so there's a perception of Hollywood that you have to be somebody or in order to break in. You have to have achieved something from the beginning. But we're all kind of saying in reality, we kind of stumble into the thing we end up doing. I remember someone calling it once a shadow career. So we show up to Hollywood to do one thing, and then there's this other career we actually end up taking, because we're not actors or directors, we're doing this other thing. But I came to change my mind about that thought, because I'm not living the shadow of what I wanted to do. In reality, I fell in love with a certain group of people, and I want to do all I can with the people that I love. So
Mm.
if it's, in my case, it's people that own production companies and creative agencies, I'll do anything for them. I love it. I
Yeah,
wake
there's
up every
something
day.
about that term shadow that sounds like unrealized, and there's nothing unrealized. I just didn't know about my
Right.
field. I didn't know. And so I don't want to put any kind of negativity on it. In fact, happy accidents. I often say I have the best job in Hollywood for so many reasons. I get to really exercise my right and left brain on a consistent and, continual level. And it's so fantastic because it's always a challenge. Every day is so vastly different. And I'm truly creative and I'm truly a businessman. So it's that wonderful yin and yang that I constantly keep working, where I wouldn't have had as much of that equilibrium as an actor. And maybe as a producer, that might have been the more likely field had I not gone into what I went into.
I had a stint where I left Hollywood while I was working at Trailer Park. I was actually going to seminary up there in Pasadena. And when I was reading your book, I had this this like aha thing of like, a lot of the work you do is like ministry. You're helping somebody come to a reality of something that they've birthed. They really have lived with this story and processed this story. You even talk about the sacrifice of doing it, to 8 o'clock and then watching dailies and that kind of a effort you put into making the film. And then you have to show up and kind of process with them good news and bad news, but to help them get this baby born, right? Like you're actually doing something.
You hit it right on the head too. I often call
Yeah.
myself a consigliere or a rabbi or priest, because people are very vulnerable. Filmmakers are very vulnerable at this stage of the process. It's like they can control the narrative, if you will, almost in its entirety until you get to the audience seeing a movie and it's the rubber hits the road time. And the audience speaks and you can't spin that. You can't hijack that narrative. The audience is going to tell you very candidly what they think of the thing that you're putting out into the world.
Yeah, but what I think is so brilliant about, because I've been to a few screenings that you've run, and I always used to love watching you with the focus groups, because anytime anyone I'm sure most of our listeners have been in a focus group, it's a little awkward at first because nobody knows each other. But what was so brilliant, the way your point about you being like sort of almost like a rabbi or a priest is so spot on, because by the end, you're like the audience's best friend. You guys are laughing together, you're having fun, but at the same time, you pull out of them what the information the filmmakers in the studio need to improve the film. And even if they just say, I just didn't like that scene, you go like, well, tell me why. Like, what was it? This was it that? And you sort of like pull out of them something that I just think that can often be difficult to get out of audiences. And I think you mentioned that a lot in your book, that it's pulling out from the audience what they really want to see get better, and it helps for the filmmaker to see it versus just looking at a score and being like, okay, they're wrong.
No. Well, Keith, being loving what I do as much as I do, and I mean truly passionate about it and loving it, is part of the success quotient. Because if you don't love what you're doing in anything, it's really hard to be inauthentic. And to be a really powerful focus group moderator, for example, is so much about authenticity and connecting with your subjects, whatever that may be. I mean, I feel like I could talk to a cat or an inanimate object, because I'm going to get behind whatever it is and understand it. That's why I don't like moderating outside of my category. It's too much effort and work, and I'm not secure enough. I'll take anyone on when it comes to movies, television content. I can get in there and provide and offer the necessary fixes and so forth, and the audience interpretation. But when I get in outside of my comfort zone, it's just a lot of preparation. So I call upon others to do their categories and leave my category to me. I can do that just fine with that, but I don't like to go out of what I know.
Yeah.
So what's it? I know there's a pushback when it comes to testing, right? Is that you probably have a technical term for it, but a
Yeah,
filmmaker is told by a
pushback
studio,
is
we're
the
going
nice term for it.
to.
No. You
But
guys,
so,
it's
what do you
not.
think the core is of that? Why do you? So I know you have a perception of like you're a stakeholder, but from a creator's point of view, what do you think is the beginning of why they want to push back?
Well,
What's
I
their
mean, because they
resistance?
know they who really wants to know the truth. So I don't. First of all, I agree with you that there's pushback, but there's also massive embracement. You hear more about the pushback, but most great directors test their movies. Martin Scorsese is a big proponent of the audience's voice. So I don't really think that it's like you can cast that,
Okay.
industry wide. There are those naysayers, and a lot of people don't want to know really the truth. And if you want to know the truth, you better be willing to hear it. You know, I've said this many times in my book tour, on my book tour, about Ron Howard, because I mentioned it in the book, where he talks about, look, I get to choose the script that I'm going to work on. I get to work with the writer on developing it. I get to cast it with the actors I want and the key, people, department heads that I want, cinematographer, editor, production designer, et cetera. I get to shoot it my way, then I get to edit it, and then I show it to an audience. And what I set out to communicate may not exactly be what was communicated or what they're picking up on. And so I have to listen and adjust. And I think that's the best way to characterize it. I mean, it's information, right? And some people don't want to let their baby in the hands of anyone. They don't want to let them go to preschool because, it's germy and and I want my kid to be with me until they go off to college. And even then I want to homeschool and have not go to, I actually know parents that have such a hold on their children, so afraid to let them go out into the world.
Sure.
Imagine, as you said earlier on, Tim, this is like birthing a child. I mean, into the world, it's something that you've created, you've nurtured, you've lived with longer than the gestation of pregnancy,
Yeah,
for
totally.
sure.
True, in a lot of ways.
And it
There's the
often
post-process.
takes on, great art takes on that almost, I don't know, quality of otherworldly, if you will. Like, it's just so intense. I see people that are at their most vulnerable, as I said, because they're about to hear this. So that's a tough thing.
But that's what I guess one of the questions I have, because I do also understand the upside, and you're right. It can, when it's embraced, there's a motivation and a purpose behind it. But isn't it possible that the testing audience or the audience has it wrong? Like, that you have a group of people that don't quite understand what the director is trying to convey, and the initial audience says, I don't get it. But some things in pop culture, once they start rolling out, they develop momentum, and then later on a audience is more willing to take advantage of it because they've heard different angles or been part of a different
Look,
conversation.
here's the thing. An audience just goes in to enjoy a movie. They don't go in trying to interpret the filmmaker's intentions. They go in to say, show me, but not in a mean way, not in a aggressive way, but in a way that a moviegoer or a movie viewer, now we say, because often movies are not viewed in the theater, would see a movie. And so they just want to like it. And if somebody hunks at you, Tim or Keith, on the freeway, one person, they're an asshole. If 4 or 5 people hunk at you, you're the asshole.
You're doing something wrong, right?
I like that. That's good.
And so, so if you really think about that, you say, I can choose to be stubborn and stick with my convictions. But as Ron said, Howard, what I'm communicating is not being heard, accepted, embraced by the audience that it was intended for. So the filmmaker might say, well, I don't care, let them come to me. I find that very indulgent often, not always, but often. Sometimes there's not a clear-cut answer, an ambiguous ending, for example. And half the audience is saying, give me more clarity, give me a more definitive ending. And then the studio is saying, no, we want that definitive ending. But the other part of the audience is saying, no, I like the ambiguity. And the filmmaker wants the ambiguity. And you usually will do a bake-off in that case. And if the scores are exactly the same, I say go with the filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to please everybody.
Right.
And it's not affecting your score. So allow the filmmaker to have her vision for that,
Yeah, I guess what I was just like putting myself in the position of Ang Lee when he's talking about trying to work like Picasso. And I understand, like, in what you were saying in that scenario is that the filmmaker has a larger responsibility because there's other people's cash, there's a studio on the line, there's, gigantic
100%.
movements.
It is not
the
art form. It is not the art form. You can argue that it is a director's medium. That is, I think.
And so the medium is the message, right? You kind of get.
Well, I know, but it's a director's medium, but it's not exclusive to a director. Like theater is an actor's medium, because it's more so, right? Because that's the.
Yeah.
That
the vulnerable one on stage. Yeah.
Well, and television is more of a producer's medium. The showrunner, the executive producer, et cetera. It doesn't mean that other people are not involved, but you can't do a film without a costumer, production designer, an editor, cinematographer, a caterer, a casting director, an accountant. You can't. Yeah. You can have the art form of writing a novel is you don't like the novel, you stick it in the back of your drawer. If you're a painter, you don't like the painting, you stick it in the back of your closet. No one's the wiser. But in the case of filmmaking, it requires great artists and tradespeople to come together for a goal to bring a vision to life, but you can't do it alone. And if you can do it alone, the old auteur, they wrote it, they directed, they produced it, they edited. Go with God, don't test it, go out in the world with it. It's your money, it's your life, whatever. That's not what we're talking about here. Like that almost never exists. Therefore, the audience has to have a say in it. It doesn't mean you have to listen, but ignore them at your own peril.
That I love. So I kind of, I knew the answer as I asked the questions, but I wanted to get that out of you because I think there's a reality to how simple people want to make the kind of work you do, or the responsibility of a studio, about limiting it to business and saying, well, that's just the business side of it. That's just the business side of it. But I'm with you. I think that the purpose of creating a film and telling a story or having a message is so that it can be received and digested. So the audience is part of the filmmaking process. It's the receiver. And a lot of the scenarios you talked about were Charlie Chaplin sitting in the back so he can listen to the audience laugh. I mean, it's the response that inspires the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Or when the I think it was Cocktail, where the movie just died. It didn't finish where the
whole tone of it changed. Yeah, the whole tone of it changed. The whole tone of it had to be rethought for the last third of the movie.
Because that's not what they wanted. That wasn't the art that they wanted to get out. They wanted the audience to have a feel-good part of it instead of this.
Well, no, the audience wanted to have a feel-good. They said, you brought me on this feel-good journey. Then there's a suicide it's taking me on a dark side. And then I never really recover from that.
Right.
So the filmmakers listened, Bob Court and the other folks involved in that. And they turned it around because of that. Pretty Woman. I remember Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman's original script, called 3000, was a very dark script. It was was a black comedy in a way, or just it wasn't a, let's just say it wasn't the romantic comedy that it turned out to be.
Right. Didn't leave it to Gary Marshall to know how to do it.
Exactly. And at the very end of that, that entire last scene was reshot because the audience craved the prince saving the princess in a classic fairy tale. I'm not saying that would fly necessarily today, but the damsel in distress, but it is archetypal in terms of many people's upbringing. And that audience at that time, which was 30 odd years ago, wanted to see that. And so that whole ending of Richard Gere coming back to get her and going up the fire escape and overcoming his fear of heights, because his fear of heights was intense, but it didn't supersede his love for her. And then they do a final kiss, made the movie a sensation as a result.
Yeah.
It made it. I want to say though, I run a company with 300 people, and Screen Engine, ASI. And, I often tell the business owners of my different units, your EBITDA, your net profit contribution is under what we need it to be. And they're saying, well, we're working ourselves to the bone. We need more people. And I go, well, you got to figure out what's going wrong, because you can't just have more people, because you either are taking on work that's draining your resources, or you're not charging enough, or you're putting too many resources on a particular project, which is kind of the same as the first thing. And so I say, look, guys, at the end of the day, we're a business. We are here to make money. That's the ticket to entry. And there is a minimum benchmark to that, a minimum entry point. And if you're not making that, we're doing something wrong. After that, you could have all the fun you want. You could have all the work-life balance you want. You could have, I can't stand that word, work-life balance. I like using life balance, because it is about, it's one of many things in
things of your life, right?
But taking what I just said to the movie business, at the end of the day, that is the ticket to entry. Every movie needs to make money, or there is no business. Business is business. Business is about making money. That is what it is intended to do. So every business, if it's a winner, will make money. If it's a break even, it's a break even situation. Maybe you hang on, maybe you don't. And if it's losing, it's a losing business. You can say it or spin it any way you want, but that's the bottom line. In that framework, and if you are more profitable, you can take more risks artistically. You can hopefully make money every time out, and make great movies every time out, and make artistically led movies every time out. It doesn't mean you have to dumb it down. And so that's where everyone needs to understand, first and foremost, if this thing doesn't make money, it is not a viable project, period.
That's right. I feel like you could be a RevThink consultant. You can join when you're done with your career, come help us, because I feel like I teach that all day long too to business owners.
Of course, because any businessman knows that, Tim. Any good businesswoman and man knows that you have to do that.
And it's the end to the result, right? Like, you're not, by the way, filmmaker, you're not just making one movie, you're trying to live out a career, and you have to stack film after film after film. And if you don't listen and your film dies, one movie doesn't make a career.
And I also want to say, Tim, that's a great point. I also want to say this whole notion of the old slate mentality, or giving a movie to a director because they want to be in business with that director on another movie that's bigger. So they want to satisfy their passion project. I think a lot of that is bullshit, because yes, relationships are important, but make the movie for the right price. Often they don't. And so they call them loss leaders. Every business has one. There's things that we approve because we want to get the bigger business. We will lose money on to get that. But I never like doing it, but sometimes you have to do that. So I'm talking a little bit about out of both sides of my mouth here, because what I'm saying is that I don't like doing it, but sometimes it is necessary. But do not make a habit of that. That should be only used in very certain circumstances for very particular reasons. But even if I have a lost leader, I tend to not lose money on my lost leader. And so if they're giving a vanity project to a director in order to seduce her to work on their next big hit, let's say, make it for the right price.
Yeah.
Well
I mean,
said.
I think your point's well taken in terms of, it's a business after all, we need to make money. It's kind of been challenged lately by the whole streaming model where nobody really knows what's a success based on if it's actually making money or is it more on the number of minutes watched or what have you. So that kind of complicates things a little bit when it comes to that.
Well, even so though, Keith, every streamer knows or should know their business intent, meaning that we don't have to know it. It's none of our business, quite frankly. I mean, I'd love to know it because because I analyze all these different movies and
right.
I'd love to know. But it's the fact is, if Netflix, for example, makes a ton of movies, they hopefully know exactly what they can spend with their algorithm of additional subs and retention of those subs, because that's what all it's about with subscribers is, how many more subscribers can they get with that piece of material and how many can they retain? And I'm sure that it switches dramatically on certain kinds of material. Red Notice was a huge movie. I'm sure they spent a lot of money. They purportedly it's the most expensive movie they ever made, but apparently it did more, like it was the highest, seen movie, however they measure it. Now, whether or not they're spinning it, that's their own internal thing, because then next time they'll do it better or different. But I'm saying it's all relative to whatever business model you have. It's not always about reporting a gross and knowing if that made money or not. If it grew their subscription rate by another million people because of that, well, sure, it was perhaps well worth it, and people are retaining their subscriptions. That is another really compelling reason.
I want to pivot real quick while we have time, because there was something you wrote in your book which I really liked, and I'm going to quote it exactly. It's if you forgive me, I'm just going to read directly from it. It says, "We tend to think of America as a country of tribes, of NASCAR dads and soccer moms, of white collar and blue collars, ROTC cadets, and hipster kids. And in many ways, I think we are that country, but not so much when the light goes down and the curtain parts. A well-crafted, entertaining movie can speak to everyone. In the darkness of the theater, people of all types and beliefs will suspend their differences for a couple of hours and just get swept away." Love that. Woo! My question to you is this: with streaming booming as much as it is, can you still get that same feeling when you're not sitting in a theater with a bunch of other folks and you're not experiencing that sort of camaraderie that you get when you go to the theater?
Absolutely. I mean, I have great satisfaction watching a movie alone in a movie theater when I'm in a run through, or I have a beautiful screening room at home. I don't need to be influenced by anyone around me. And I know that if you, Keith, and you, Tim, were watching that same movie, we would call each other afterwards and come together on many areas of it, right? I think there's a couple of things going on here. There's human connection on the one hand, which is universal. To listen to Shakespeare, for example, and you say, well, I don't know what that means. I don't know what Shakespeare, what they're saying. Yeah. But great Shakespeare is about behavior, right? And great behavior is universal. I mean, it's so if you can elevate your craft and you are able to touch someone, whether through a performance, through the writing that led to that performance, to the editing that led from the writing to the performance, to the cutting of that, that's magic. And it transcends demographics. It transcends demography. It transcends even psychographics, which is more attitudes and behaviors, right? Because it's everyone feels certain things. I mean, there's always the exception, but 95% of the world knows that when they see a dog being injured in a video, that they don't go, oh yeah, they either can't look, they cry, they turn away, there's a call to action, whatever it may be. There's just a universal pathos. Mm-hmm. And so great art does that. And movies have a way of reaching the masses. So it really is something I believe in. That said, we're also doing ourselves a tremendous disservice in today's day and age by, you'll appreciate this coming from creative advertising, by being obsessed with these demographic identifiers, bucketing people into, whether they're female or male, whether they
four quads, baby, the four quadrants.
Well, the quads are just one thing.
Right.
When Keith mentions the quads, 4 quads for years, and that's mostly because of Nielsen ratings connected to U.S. Census data, where you buy media in, cost per thousands in those buckets of 25 to 54, 18 to 34, 18 to 49. And that's archaic, as we have moved so much into streaming and linear is becoming less and less important in people's lives in terms of advertising. Mm. So my suggestion for the next generation, and something I'm going to be putting forward in this summer, I'm going to bringing some of my competitors together, even people from Nielsen, even people from the US Census are my hope to get part of this, is to have a really healthy dialogue about how we can pivot that and create more like segmentations, so that a massive government segmentation of what the US population looks like. Let's say it comes out, because you never know what a segmentation, how many segments they're going to be until after you conduct the segmentation. But let's say there are 12 segments at the end of the day. The three of us, well, I think we're all cisgender males, but I'm gay. Are you guys straight? Do you identify as straight?
Yeah.
Okay. But I guarantee we come together on several TV shows. If I were, or Keith, if you were African-American, and Tim, you were Hispanic, and I'm Asian, we might not ever see those television shows, because the way that the advertising would be bought might be by ethnicity and race. And so that is not a way to ingratiate like commonalities and coming together as people beyond, age, gender, ethnicity, and race. So that's old.
Yeah, it's like what's depriving us of.
And by the way, let me just finish one. It's also a way of almost in our little world being part of a sexism, genderism, racism, because exactly it's bucketing people. Like, why are we doing that anymore? This is not who we are, especially Gen Zs and half of millennials. They don't give a shit about not like we, not even us, but our parents' generation cared, because that's how they grew up, much more so into these buckets of identification. But now it's like we live in in 2043, America as a whole turns into a minority majority country. We've already had 4 states in DC turn. That is to say, more minority, ethnically and racial minorities live in California, Hawaii, Arizona, Texas, and I believe DC, more than Caucasians. And that's going to happen in the entire country.
Totally, yeah.
In the 40s. So why are we looking at this? And that affects all of the kind of things we're talking about. Your program, your podcast, the essence of it is very much about the brokenness and the fixes, right, that can come from these early changes, these DNA changes in our industry that really need to occur. And they're occurring with the streamers, because the streamers, by and large, don't give a damn about demography. They care about subscribers.
Yeah.
And they don't even know what people look like. They have number 1, 7, 19, 28, 822, 670. All these are numbers, and they have commonalities of likes and shared values, and perhaps educational and status commonalities, whatever it may be. I'm not saying demography is completely unimportant, but it's not should not be the key drivers of what is creating our advertising, which creates our content.
Which creates the content, yeah.
Content,
and
yeah.
the outreach. That's we're being deprived of these pop culture experiences that you and I could sit around and talk about, because we all shared a moment or a time, or watched a film, saw a sporting event. There were these things that used to bring people together, and there was a shared experience. And I think you're right. The more it's divided, the more the echo chambers have events that they share, but it's hard to understand a crossover conversation or allow for entry into something where we can share something together. And that one is, I believe that the tech that's now involved in entertainment is taking advantage of us, because it can divide us and keep us subscribed, because it keeps feeding us the sugar and the butter that we like, right? Like we like, oh, I love this. This is perfect. It's exactly the film that I like, but it doesn't challenge us always, or currently, to do something different. Somebody else outside of that technology has to do that. Where a lot of what you're talking about, and almost like I can understand, like your drive for life is to be able to share. You've captured, in over 30 years, you've captured this idea of what an audience is.
That's right.
And how an audience embraces story. And
but Tim, my theory are less theories and based in empirical evidence. And I spend my life going around the country.
But you have the luckiest job in Hollywood. A lot of us don't have that empirical.
No, but I'm saying I have that.
Feel it in our bones, right?
So yeah. I made a comment yesterday at lunch to a journalist. I said, every movie, if made and marketed for the right price, should make money. And she said to me, you know, Kevin, it's interesting. There have been many people that I've sat across from at lunch who can claim that, but I'm listening to you in a different way. And I said, tell me, talk why, you know, I kind of knew the answer. And she said, because you're coming from more of a data-driven
right.
Sort of analysis of that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Of risk mitigation, of trying to get really beneath the surface and make a true business case. I love content, as I know you two do, and most people do. Very few people say, well, I don't really like watching things. Like that's not, we are in such a golden era. So we're going to turn this, as we get into the last part of this, we're going to turn this in a really positive way, which is, you know, the opportunities right now are endless. In my little corner, my little area of the business that I can affect change in making this world a better place and making our industry better, I think is in this notion of having people reframing the discussion around how we measure success and how we begin the process of that by understanding innately what you're making from the outset, sizing the audience potential for that, and then putting a budget behind that. But if you don't understand, people think they understand it. They create aspirational comps of movies that have nothing to do with the movies that are being made, and consequently lose tens of millions of dollars. And there's no reason to do that. I'm not saying you're going to win every time out. You're going to do your best to win every time out. And if you do the work, the pre-work, the pre-green light, pre-development, pre-production work correctly, and understand it innately. Shame on you if you don't know, producer, that there are only two buyers that are going to buy your movie about garden soil. One is a horticulture website, and one is something on cable, and one will pay $20,000 in perpetuity for all rights because it's a web series, webisodes, and it's a segment, and one will pay a license fee on a cable of $75,000. I don't know, making this up, but the point is, don't make that
do it for 300,000.
Right.
100,000 for 80,000.
Yeah.
Come somewhere in between.
Program
that.
I teach called Show Launcher, and it's exactly, again, I swear you and I should be in business together. It's exactly that premise. We say you have to start first with your why. Why are you doing it?
Why?
Who does that appeal to?
I love that, Tim.
And then where? Yeah. So it's why, who, where, and then finally what? What should you be making? What is the budget? Who should be in it? That's the final product should have everything in mind of what the audience is. But don't go spend $300,000 for a TV show, one that will never be made. Right? That's the first.
I love what you're saying, because you're not even saying 3 million. You're saying 300,000. I got to say, the best thing to do is to understand a need. Like, I was starting to tell you, we made a movie that I financed last year for a very low price, but I did my research. I knew the buyers. I knew whatever it was, and so we're whole before we're even going out.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
You say we're whole before we're even going out into the world with it.
But how did the testing go for that movie? I want to know how it
not particularly well.
Right. Wait, did you do the testing yourself?
Yep.
Or did someone? Oh, really? Yeah.
Yep.
How was that to be each your own?
I was so used to it, and I really listened, and I really listened, and I really made changes based on. But it's it's somewhat painful to hear something you've worked on for a while being bullied or being shat upon or being scrutinized. It's like no one wants to hear that. But when you do, if you have the opportunity to hear it and know, and you believe in the wisdom of the crowd or the crowds, then that many are hunking at you.
Yeah, they're all right. Listen, I could talk to you all day, so you and I gotta go to coffee.
Seriously,
I always do this to our guests. I always say, let's go to coffee, because I'm on the West Coast and Keith is on the East Coast, so we can't have the coffees that I can have in the world. But we've been saying your book, but I don't think we've hold it up for anybody. Audience-ology is the book that you've written, that we've been referring to, but you gave us a sneak peek into. You're also writing a second book too, right? So you are now an author as well as.
Well, yeah, it's a ton of work, and I already missed my first deadline. Apparently, that's very part of the course. Normal. Yeah, I think that's the normal trajectory for a freshman writer. But I will say that it's called How to Score in Hollywood, and it's based on sort of the green light process and the risk mitigation that we're talking about. I have a 4 ability philosophy. Based on, capability, which is what we're talking about now, and then playability, which is what I talk about in audienceology, marketability, which is what you guys have done in testing spots and understanding the persuasiveness of advertising, and then buzzability. And each one has its own check marks that have to be, checked along the way. Sometimes you only need one. You usually need at least 2. 3 will get you a pretty strong hit, and 4 is just a smash. But having none of them will get you a failure.
Love it.
Fascinating.
So listen, if you're listening to this, so you want to reach out to Kevin because you want to work for his business, they should find you they should get on LinkedIn and hit you up, right? That's how we're going to do it. No. Screen Engine is the
actually Tim is vetting all my inquiries.
I love
it. So go to him first.
TimThompson.com. Yeah. My website is KevinGoetz360.com. Kevin Goetz, Goetz 360.com.
And that's where they can find your book.
They can find
I
the book.
bought
They can
this
see
on
they can see a
Amazon, so-
trailer too. Yeah, Amazon, wherever books are sold. There's an audio version also. That is a lot of fun, I think.
And the book, we should say, is stories. It's not. It wasn't a data book. It was a book about
it's not
the
a
stories and the filmmakers.
Yeah.
I love the chapter about the black dress. I mean, I could almost imagine being that producer to see the audience start growing for the film. It's just one of those amazing parts of Hollywood we can be
It's
part
fun.
of.
People love the comments I'm getting are just extraordinary. I'm very grateful for all people who have read it and are so positive about it. So thanks for having me on, you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming, Kevin. We
Thanks for being
appreciate
part
it.
of this.
It's great seeing you, Keith. It's been a while.
Yeah, good to see you too, Kevin. Hope to have you back again sometime.
I'd love that. I'd love that. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Bye,
you.
Kevin.
Take care.
Bye, fellas.